Our first talk is by Jason Irvine. Jason is the manager of protected areas within the Department for Environment and Water of the South Australian Government. And Jason has been instrumental in guiding this ongoing process around nominating regions of the Flinders Ranges for World Heritage listing. So without any further ado, I will invite Jason to give us his talk.
Okay, can everyone hear me okay? Otherwise I'll bend down a little bit. Okay, thanks for having me along today. This is a really exciting project and I feel incredibly privileged to be part of it for a few reasons which I'll talk through briefly in a moment. Okay. First things first, in addition to acknowledging that we're meeting on the lands of the Kaurna people today, I also wanted to acknowledge that this World Heritage Project is on the lands of the Adnyamathanha people, and there's no doubt that it's a place of incredible past, present and future importance to the Adnyamathanha people and their community, and the evidence of occupation is throughout the Flinders Ranges, as you can see in this photo from Arkaroo Rock in Ikura Flinders Ranges National Park. I do have a confession to make. I'm not a geologist. I have a background in national parks, but before that in Latin, so that's equally useless for World Heritage in geology in the Flinders Ranges. But what I do have is a lot of passion about this landscape, and I do feel very privileged and in awe of a lot of people, some of them you'll hear from today, like Steve Hoare and Jim Galing, but also Wolfgang and others, and there's a number of people in this room who I can see, who there are hundreds of years of knowledge and experience about the Flinders Ranges, and there is, without a doubt, this project would not be happening without those people, so I 100% acknowledge those people as well. I also do have to say that Steve Hoare himself is probably going to be responsible for my 11-year-old studying geology. He's already decided that's what he wants to do. So World Heritage. It is cultural and natural heritage around the world that is considered to be of outstanding universal value for all humanity. Now, this concept of outstanding universal value rests on three pillars. One of those is there are 10 criteria in the World Heritage Convention, 6 cultural and 4 natural, and so you either meet one or more of those criterion. The property must have integrity, so it actually must be intact. There's no point listing something if it's something that's no longer there. And the other thing is that you must have effective protection and management regimes for it. There's no point listing something in Syria at the moment, for example, because you don't have any effective mechanisms to protect that and well manage that area. I do a little bit of a straw poll often at these sorts of things, where I ask people to put up their hands if they think World Heritage is a positive thing or a negative thing as their first response, just as a member of the community when they hear the words World Heritage. So World Heritage, hands up if you think it's a positive thing, generally. Oh, you guys are easy. Negative? There's the door. No, just kidding. It's quite interesting because normally it's a 50-50 split where people say negative because I think it's about anti-development and stopping things and control and whatever. And then the positives who say, well, this is about recognising something's value. And to some extent it is both. You can't protect something if you're not having some sort of control on it. So I talked before about the vast amount of knowledge of people associated with this project. We've spent 3 years working with a group of people from around Australia and some from overseas to help us develop what we call a serial property statement, which is just helping us get our head around the vastness of the Flinders Ranges geology and paleontology and its potential story, and coming up with a narrative that we think will stand up in a World Heritage context. You have to have a very clear, sophisticated, defensible narrative, and we've ducked and weaved and we've put things in, we've pulled them out, and we've now reached a point where we think we have something really, really quite special. And as we're drilling down into that narrative, it's becoming enlivened by just the sheer amount of uniqueness and incredible stories and things I keep hearing from a paleontological and geological perspective in the Flinders. So why are we talking about it? I've touched on it, but this is in a nutshell. There's no other place on Earth where the geological record, and especially the emergence of complex multicellular animal life, is preserved and accessible in a near continuous succession. It doesn't say this stuff is not elsewhere, but this is where you can see it best in our view. So we're saying that there's a 350 million year period where the interaction between atmospheric and climatic conditions and the emergence of more complex life forms lets us tell the story of the rise of a habitable Earth. The other thing that the nomination is doing is talking about the Flinders Ranges' sustained and ongoing value for science. We're all familiar with the phrase of Mawson's talking about Arkaroola being one great open-air museum, but really, we all know that's what the Flinders Ranges is, and whether it's Reg Sprigg or Douglas Mawson or Jim Gayling or Steve Hall or all these names that are and will be associated with the Flinders Ranges, it does have this continuous value for science, which is part of World Heritage. Is how does this add to our knowledge and appreciation of the planet's history? Now, we are talking about a number of discrete component parts. We're not talking about a big ellipsis around the whole Flinders Ranges. There are a number of national parks and sites on pastoral lands that we're looking at, listing that will give expression to that World Heritage story. The parks that we're talking about are Ediacara Conservation Park, Vulkathana Gammon Ranges National Park and Ikara Flinders Ranges National Park. The pastoral leases, where there'll be discrete sites on those leases that we're talking about, we're still in conversations with a lot of those pastoralists, and out of respect to them and the process, we've said until they are ready to be public about it, then we're respecting those confidential discussions and not sharing that at this point. But what we do feel that we'll be able to achieve is a number of iconic sites that can be protected for World Heritage, but importantly have a suite of management regimes that suit the property owner for ongoing scientific access. Every one of them that I speak to loves having science occurring on their property. The visitors is the other issue. So the level of access that they want to see in the future will be entirely dependent on them. World Heritage doesn't mandate that you've got to open your doors. So far, as I mentioned, we spent 3 years getting the science right to be able to have a consensus view on what we're proposing to do. We're quite fortunate. We've got a technical advisor, Graham Warboys, who lives in Canberra, who is advising us on World Heritage. He's evaluated quite a few geological sites in South Africa and Italy and Asia as well. We do know we have a unique story for the World Heritage List. I've said bilateral support, I mean bipartisan support. We do have both major parties and the federal government supportive of going forward for World Heritage. And our first stage process in World Heritage around tentative listing, we're well on the way to getting that on the World Heritage list in the next few months. We've commenced our partnerships with Adnyamathanha traditional owners. State government's had a little bit of a challenging relationship with Adnyamathanha in the last couple of years, so we're just rebuilding that through this process. Got a community reference group working through with landowners. One of the key things which I'll touch on briefly in a moment is purchasing part of Nilpena Station, which augments our story for the Ediacaran fossils in that part of the world. We're certainly not looking to purchase all of these sites by any stretch of the imagination, and the government's made that very clear. But the owners of Nilpena have been looking for a future for protecting their fossils for a long time, and so this has been a happy coming together. The pastoral and tourism and mining sectors we're working with, and I should have said at the outset, the Geological Survey of South Australia has been absolutely instrumental to this process and the commitment that they've made to this World Heritage nomination, and working with them on how we will manage the site in the future. We wouldn't be able to do it if we didn't have the Geological Survey on board. So in terms of timeframes, we're looking at really over the next 12 months starting to draft the nomination. So our core group of contributors will be writing up their components of the nomination dossier, and we'll be putting in place those agreements and arrangements that we need to for working with the various landowners and so forth. So ultimately we're looking to nominate in February 2022, which can lead us to hopefully getting listing by 2024. Just briefly touching on Nilpena, I won't steal any of Jim's thunder. What's really exciting about Nilpena is that it lets us create a site that can be a demonstration site for what World Heritage can be. So the government's purchased part of Nilpena to protect those fossils, and we're looking to, using the historic pastoral precinct, to create a research hub and visitor precinct. We are looking at an arrangement with philanthropies to ensure that that place can be well managed. National Parks on its own will struggle to manage a site like that. Paleontology is not its core business, but having a foundation involved that can support that is absolutely fundamental. So we get Nilpena up and running and well run for visitation and sustainable tourism and ongoing research. What we're hoping is not only will that bring the broader community and science community along about what World Heritage can mean, but when we actually go to list the site and we have an evaluation mission come out to Australia, they'll be able to see that what we can achieve at Nilpena we can achieve elsewhere in the Flinders Ranges through the listing. Thank you.